All right. Hey, what's up, guys? Just from the jump, before anybody maybe asks, there out in the ether, I'm filming in my son's room. You'll notice some of the background materials. I also have a cat who's very interested in what's happening. He's not going to be interested in me picking him up, but this is Mr. Nibbles. He's very cute. You can hear him purr, probably. Anyway. All right, so he's going to be around. I want to jump right into what I'm here to talk about. First of all, in case, I guess we'll call it like the new cadence isn't clear, what I was thinking we would do, you're still going to have your usual assignments, right? All that stuff that's on the syllabus, been on the syllabus since the start of the semester. But I think what I want to do going forward is, like I mentioned in the previous video, two kind of episodes you can think of them as, right? The first one of the week, so the first one for this week was the one where I took the proposal a student wants to write about the movie The Pacifier, which is, by all accounts, looks like a flaming piece of garbage, but a great movie to write about for this paper. I took that proposal, I kind of walked you through like ways it could be improved, but more importantly, ways you could move from that proposal to start thinking about the paper, right? And then we had a discussion board that I want you guys to do by the end of the week associated with that, right? To get you guys thinking about it. All of this is meant as practice for you when it comes to your texts. The second episode of the week, which is this one, I'm going to do something similar, but I'm going to ask less of you. So here's what that looks like. I'm going to walk you through the proposal that's up on Courseden. Hopefully you can see it now. It's about One Direction. It's going to be a lot of fun, I guess. But I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to have you do any written work for the second episode, right? It's the end of the week. You already have what I've assigned you anyway. But I still think there out in the ether, wherever you are, if you're taking some notes, if you're honestly not just listening, but thinking while I'm walking you through this person's proposal, I think it can offer some benefit as well. But like I said, I don't want to just like keep piling on all kinds of stuff on top of you because you have your own work to take care of. All right. Before we get into the proposal, a little bit of business. Number one, I've already mentioned it. You have a discussion board for that pacifier proposal assignment that I posted on Monday. You want to go take care of that. You need an original post and then 2 responses to classmates. That's due by the end of the week, along with 2 annotated bib entries. These work just like the other bibs. It's the same prompt, even. I do want to remind you guys, because I've had some people that are a little bit confused about this, and it says this on the syllabus, and I have actually mentioned this, but you don't want to use your bibs for primary sources this time. So a primary source would be like Slaughterhouse-5, would be a book, a film, a movie. I said a film and a movie. I meant a TV show, an episode, anything, like the thing that you are studying, right? That's a primary source. A secondary source, so what the bibs are for, would be an article or something like that, okay? And it could be specifically about your text. It could be about a different text and you're applying it to your primary text. But here again, told you. Here again, that's what the bibs are for. One last bit of business and then we'll jump into like what we're here to do. You also have an anxiety and confusion discussion board that is optional. That's due by the end of this week. You can really post there anytime, right? I'll try to keep checking it. But because I've had a few people, very few, but a few people post to it already, I'm going to go ahead and, he's distracting the hell out of me, and address those. And then if we get any more after that, I'll keep addressing them as they come, basically, okay? Number one, somebody said they didn't know what was required of them in the class. That's very vague, but given the vagueness of that statement, I'm taking it at face value, the requirements of the class. Like that's broken down pretty well in the syllabus. You get all kinds of like percentages and due dates and yeah. And we went over the syllabus at the top of class. We I think pretty consistently go over like when stuff is due and what assignments are. So unless there's like something more specific to that particular comment that I'm just missing, I'm trying to block because he's distracted. I'm just not sure what else to say other than like maybe revisit the syllabus, revisit a prompt or 2. And of course you can always ask me, I mean, if there's something more specific that I'm not getting out of that statement, But as of right now, that's all I really know to say to that. Let me see. Somebody also brought up the final project. Don't worry about that right now. We have a prompt for it, actually, if you want to go find it. I forget what week it's on, but again, this is all in the syllabus. It's really not a big deal. That's mostly going to ask you to sum up there at the end of the semester what you're thinking about for your paper. It's not... Concentrate on the paper. The paper is what matters right now, okay? And then I also I saw another comment, and again, it was kind of... It's I say it's funny. I don't because it's ironic. They said something like I want to say the rubric isn't written in like, and I'm paraphrasing with my memory, but it's not written in correct English or something like that. Number one, I don't write the rubric. No one does. Those are written by the department. And what's ironic about that, right? Like what's funny is it's written by the English department. So it's absolutely incorrect English. I think what this person means is it's not written in like words that they speak, which is fair, but on what planet would you want your teachers to talk like you? The whole point is to come and learn, right? And grow. Yeah. Now, all that said, I think what they're trying to say is they don't understand maybe what the rubric is asking of them. And if that's true, number one, always come at me with some specifics and we can like, oh, I don't get this one cat, or I don't understand like this particular piece of feedback, anything like that. I mean, I can walk you through like in an email or what have you. But what I would say generally, right, to that general comment is everything we've talked about this semester in terms of papers, the structure for an introduction, the 3 I's when it comes to body paragraphs, looking at details when it comes to evidence, and then finally the big question that some of you still struggle with, which I understand, that's the hardest part of the class because it's the one that makes you think the most, is what does your text, whatever it is, have to say about us as a people, a society, a culture? If you're not doing that, then you don't have a thesis, you don't really have an argument. That's a problem. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to keep addressing those as they come. That's the only business we have. Now I'm going to dive into the proposal that hopefully you're looking at. We're going to talk about One Direction. I know nothing about them. There's a very good chance that most of you out there know way more about these people than I do, even if, you know, you're sitting wherever you're sitting and you're like, I'm not a fan of those fucking people. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. You grew up in an era where they were very popular. I grew up with like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. Same kind of thing. I'm just older than you, so I wasn't there. Like, it was not a part of my world, these One Direction people. Now that's, so the point I'm making to you is I can only use the proposal that I have right here. I'm going completely off of that. If something is somehow incorrect or like missing something, I do not have that information in here. I just don't have it. Okay, let's get right to it. I'm gonna walk you through paragraph by paragraph, and I've edited this a little bit from the original for sort of organizational concerns for you guys. You're welcome. What I want you to do now in the video, if you haven't done so already, I want you to read through the proposal just so you have a general sense of the thing. Go ahead and pause this, read it, and come back. I'm gonna wait a beat. Okay, I assume you either paused and did what I asked, or you just don't care, which maybe that works for you. Okay, so the first paragraph, what are the big concerns here, right? They're saying a lot of things, a lot of it really good, I think. They're headed in a good direction, mostly because they're very specific when it comes to their argument, right? It seems like they already have an idea of what they want to talk about. Now, when we get to the end of this, or toward the end, I'm going to try to make it even more specific. But for right now, it's a proposal. We're all just kind of like, I sort of know what I want to talk about. And we're doing pretty well here. What's our big concern in the first paragraph? We're talking about how these young men, one of them says they're like 16 or whatever, you know, so they're boys. The proposal even calls them at one point. But they're young men who are being sexualized. Absolutely. Every boy band throughout history, even before my time, right? You can go all the way back to, there's a very old magazine called Tiger Beat from the 60s or the 70s, definitely the 70s, where you'd have like the Bee Gees and people like that, that were all like, you know, they'd have like their shirts open and like, it's a very old idea, is what I'm saying. But that also means it's definitely worth investigating. Like, it's something we do a lot. And again, the question is like, well, why do we do that? And this brings me to my first issue with the proposal. They say in the first paragraph that it's forced. This sexualization is forced upon these young men. I'm not disagreeing with that necessarily. However, I am curious who they think is forcing it, right? Because that's going to be kind of important. They don't really say in the first paragraph. I think they will eventually. But for right now, that's a big question I have basically going into the rest of this. I want you guys kind of thinking about as we go. They feel like, and again, in some ways I think this is fair to say, that the way these young men, these boys are depicted in the media, just everywhere you see their face, right? Or their body, actually, is what we're talking about. It's almost always just overtly sexualized. At one point, they call them a sex object, right? And that's kind of forced upon them. That image, that brand is sort of forced upon them in some way, which is true. I agree. Okay. Second paragraph, we get a little more specific still, which is very good. So we make the point in this paragraph that it's not just about sex, right? But romance. Those are different things. They're related, but they're not the same thing. What's the difference between sexualizing somebody, but then asking them, you know, it's something like, because again, I'm going off my memory for the sake of time in this video. But they're asking them, do they write like romantic songs or like romantic tweets? Or if that's a real question, that's really stupid. But again, that tells us that we're not just sexualizing these guys. We absolutely are. But also, it's a bit bigger than that, right? There's more going on. So again, my question is, and this is true of every boy band, right? We all know this. Why are all their songs, all their everything about them is like this? They're sexualized, but they're also like, oh girl, it's right. It's always exactly like that every time. Why? Two questions that can leap to mind right now. Number one, this stuff sells. These guys are millionaires, every single one of them right now. How gross is that? Why does it sell? The inversion of that question is, why do we buy it, right? That says there's a demand for this sort of thing. The sexualization of these young men, but also the genre they're a part of, the generic concerns of that genre deal very heavily, I'm going to give you a big word, but I'm going to define it for you, in heteronormative, I lost my train of thought. I was thinking about how to define it for you. But heteronormative relationships, like, I'm sure there's a few, like, stray sort of examples I'm thinking about that don't fit this rule, but for the most part, boy bands seem to always be, like, young men singing to young women, right? It's always that very classic, traditional trope of young men should be with young women, right? So you have the proper age as well as the proper like gender assignments in terms of relationships, right? And again, that sells to us as a culture. We like that these bands, along with everything else they're doing, are kind of celebrating those ideas, right? Every one of those songs is like, I just want to dance, or whatever dumb shit they sing, right? You could argue is a celebration of those ideas, right? Is kind of saying, yeah, we should keep it this way. So that's interesting. What else? Well, the last question I would ask here, just to think about as we go, all that said, does this have anything to do with their prospective audience? Traditionally speaking, for the most part, boy bands are marketed to young women, more specifically young girls. I grew up with a little sister. That's why I know about NSYNC and Backstreet Boys as much as I do. And I mean, again, I think she got into them when she was like 11 or something, right? Like, And think about how we're talking about these guys. They are all about romance and also sexualized. So we're selling this very sexualized male image to young girls, like young girls. Isn't that gross? Right? Shouldn't that bother anybody? But it bothers no one. We're all more than fine with it. We expect it. And again, that's a big red flag to me. I'm like, well, why? What does it say about us? Again, that not just that we're cool with this, but we expect this product that we make as a society, we expect it to be marketed to young girls. What does that say about not just our opinion of these boy bands, but our opinion of young girls and their role in our society, right? What are we saying they're meant for, or meant to, like, what role are they meant to play, right? These are the bigger questions we're trying to raise, first of all. This is why I'm making the video as an example, but this is why it's hard to write a good thesis, right? You have to do your best, and it is difficult, but do your best to answer these questions. Just take a swing. Be wrong at first, but take a swing at these hard questions, okay? Almost done, kind of. Third paragraph, we get even more specific. This is a really good proposal. There's got some holes in it that I'm going to point out at the end, but in general, the way that it works, we kind of keep going further and further down this rabbit hole, right? I really like a lot, and I'd like you guys to try to emulate. I mean, you don't have to turn in something else, but, you know, be thinking like this. We get more specific in the third paragraph, and the biggest point we make here is that we want these guys to be sexually active. We talked about that. It's part of them being sexualized. We want to see them out and about. We want to know, hey, this guy's with that girl or whatever, you know, like that is just further evidence to kind of back up that brand, right? Makes total sense. But then they make the point that they also get a lot of flack for being sexually active, which is true, I guess. Again, I don't know a lot about boy bands. When I first started dating my wife, she was really big into Taylor Swift. Again, I'm older than you. I know she's still popular, but you get my point. And I remember Taylor Swift is the only kind of corollary I have. Something similar would go on, right? Like, people always want to know, like, who's she dating? What's going on? And then as soon as it's like, oh, she's such a, I can't believe she, right? It's this weird dichotomy of you're expected to engage in this behavior, and then we're gonna shit on you for engaging in this behavior. And again, when we find a weirdness like that, you immediately have to start theorizing about why. I have some thoughts. I haven't offered you many thoughts because I've wanted you guys kind of turn your wheels for a little bit here. One idea. Our student here says at one point that they're sex objects, these young men, in one direction. Sure, absolutely. Again, I would say that's a start to an argument rather than an end, because, I mean, I said it just now. Did that strike any of you as surprising? Were any of you sort of like, oh shit, I can't believe, right? It just made too much sense, because it does. So it can absolutely be part of an argument. It could be the beginning of an argument, but it can't be the end, because you're going to give me a thesis. The guys in one direction are sex objects, and then you'll have a body paragraph on open shirts, and you'll have a body paragraph on suggestive lyrics, right? You just laundry list all the ways that they're sex objects. That's banal. It's very banal, but it's a good start. Now, along with that, again, I believe it's in the third paragraph. Sorry about clearing my throat. At one point, one of the guys, I'm not going to even attempt to remember their names, okay? One of them apparently is deemed a womanizer. That's interesting, because just in that term, we kind of get, it kind of really neatly sums up the damned if you do, damned if you don't from a moment ago, right? We need you to be sexually active. We need you to be a womanizer, right? In some sense. But at the same time, when you do it, I mean, the term womanizer has a negative connotation, right? You're out and about all over town with all these women. What are you doing? You're a womanizer, right? It's meant to be an insult. Well, what about that? Why? Like, might you posit, for instance, P-O-S-I-T, by the way, might you posit, for instance, that, like, one idea I have here is we do because it backs up this image, we do want these guys to be sexually active, but might one piece of conjecture be that we only want them to be sexually active with like one woman? You know what I mean? And if so, what does that say about us? Again, like the big question I think that we're dancing around here is something to the effect of these boy bands say something about how we think sex, romance, relationships should work, I think is what we're getting at in this proposal, right? And if that's the case, another cat came in, sorry. This idea about they hate this guy because he's a womanizer, to me suggests that we think relationships should be a certain way, and that was him. And what that certain way is important. That's part of your argument. And then on the flip side, another part of the argument seems to be that it can only be that way, sort of in this arena with these boy bands. And again, the question becomes why. Like, I'm not going to be able to answer all of these, and there's a reason for that I'm going to come to. But I think that's where that's the ballpark we're in, is this question around basically what do boy bands like One Direction tell us about us in terms of how we view proper relationships. There's like proper sex, there's proper romance, is what they're saying, I think. Lastly, fourth paragraph, I would be very careful assigning blame. We finally kind of do it here. We talk about the media here in 2020. God, the media. Look, the media is an issue. Absolutely. The problem with that way of thinking is it lets all of us off the hook. The media wouldn't do what they do if it didn't sell. You see what I'm saying? So I think a lot of the time we get to pretend that we're being sold to, and we kind of conveniently forget that we're buying everything. So I'll put it to you this way. I'm going to have a cute drawing for you. I did this in one of the classes. I don't remember which one, so I'm just going to do it here. And it's on notebook paper, and I'm sorry. I want you to see this. This is a very old theory, a very well-regarded theory. I'm going to try to hold it up to where you can see. Okay. God, my handwriting is terrible. All right. Culture and art, okay? This is a circle. This is a cycle, right? Culture creates art. Something in our culture, our values, our way of thinking about things, our view of the world, right? As a people, a society, a culture, created One Direction, okay? They were born out of that culture, and they created art. Not high art, we're not saying that, but they created something, and we can call it art, okay? And then that art informs culture going forward, and then that culture is going to create more art, and it's a cycle. You see that? Now, the same thing can apply, because we're throwing new terms around these days, and man, I'm going to write that again. My handwriting is unbelievable. All right. Same idea. This is media, and this is us, and I hardcore apologize for the handwriting, but the media has a message. They do sell things to us. They do try to make money off of us. All that is very true. And by the way, when we say media, I think a lot of you think like the news. Media is any visual media, any written media, okay? Anyway, yes, absolutely. And that does inform us, that does shape us. But then again, we're a part of this cycle too. We shape that media by buying those things, by demanding certain stories, certain ideas, sort of show up in our media, right? It's a cycle. We're a part of it. So what I don't want you to do is simply say something like, oh, the media forces this image on One Direction. Maybe. But again, you're ignoring us. We want this. We do. They wouldn't sell if we didn't. So again, as always, the question, no matter what text you're doing, right? I know most of you aren't doing One Direction, thankfully. But What does your text say about us as a people, a society, a culture? If it's a movie, well, that movie probably sold to a bunch of people. Probably, a lot of people probably liked that movie. Why? There's some kind of message in there about who we are, about what our values are. And we like seeing that depicted, right? Because again, just the way that I talked about One Direction, that kind of tells us, it validates our values to see them on the screen, right? Like, see, I knew all along, even if it's subconscious, right? Even if we don't think it out loud, that's what we're trying to figure out in these papers. That's what we're trying to figure out in the first paper. Second paper was a little bit different, sort of, because you didn't participate in the argument, right? But this whole semester has been, what do these texts tell us about us as a people, society, or culture? You take your pick. The big beef I have with this proposal, and this won't come up for all of you, but the text the student chose, One Direction, is a huge text. And they kind of tell you that in the proposal, they cite briefly interviews and tweets, so like social media at large. I assume these guys have multiple albums, each with however many songs on it. They got music videos, they had concert tours. Oh God, there's some I'm probably leaving out. The text of One Direction is enormous, right? So we can't necessarily take all of that on. What this student needs to do is find a focus. Given what they say in the proposal, I would say one thing they absolutely need to do is pick like at least a song. Now, they could kind of double dip and instead of just a song, they could do like a music video, especially since it seems like they're mostly concerned with how these guys are depicted visually. I think a music video would allow you to talk about some of their lyrics, which would be helpful, but we keep talking about these guys without having their shirts on. We should probably find a text that lets us do that. I'm sure they're like running down the beach or like splashing each other, like, oh, he's wet now, ha ha ha, right? Like something like that. It'll probably be pretty easy to find. We need that. That's one sort of primary text you could use. And much like a TV show, I've mentioned to a couple of you who are doing TV shows, you know, no more than 2 episodes. If they're shorter episodes than 3 tops. In this case, maybe you have a music video and then maybe 1 or 2 absolutely max primary sources. So like a music video, if there's some kind of interview the band gave, it seems like they cited one that they liked, maybe that'll be another primary source. And then no more than 1 other than that, right? Because you're going to get your primary sources, and that's where you're going to pull your evidence, okay, to try to talk about these ideas in a little more detail with a little more specificity. And then you're going to go out and find secondary sources for your bibs, whether these are articles about One Direction or other boy bands or the ways we sexualize certain kinds of people. The last thing I would leave you with, because I know some of you are going to struggle with this, you don't need to find sources about your primary source. Oftentimes, you're not going to be able to, just because they're too new, right? But instead, think about how we did this in class. We focused on ideas. Yes, we found some sources about Vonnegut, but I also highlighted for you guys way back when with the research stuff. We just like looked up masculinity and war at one point. You know, we looked for what are our big themes that we're interested in. Let's see what's out there. You'll be surprised with what you can find sometimes, and you'll definitely be surprised when you're like, oh shit, this thing that this guy is saying about, I don't know, like this movie from the 70s or whatever, totally applies to One Direction in the 2000s. Because these ideas aren't new. They're given to us in new ways, but they're a good deal older than that, and people have been thinking about them forever. So that's how I would go about research. You can try looking for first articles that are explicitly about your primary source. I would do that. I don't mind you guys doing that. But then after you exhaust that search, probably pretty quickly, think about your themes, think about what ideas you're after, go research those, and look for arguments. Don't just look for statistics. You guys, a lot of you think if you find like a psychological study, that's going to work for you. 95% of the time, all those ever say is like, yep, we do this. And that's what you're going to say. So it doesn't really help you. Like, find someone who's talking about a text, who's trying to make an argument in the same way we are. You'll get a lot more mileage out of it. All right, that's all I got. Thanks.